Good morning. It's the 12th of September today, and I'm Chris Tankey from the Brisbane Revival Fellowship, bringing you the Daily Post. We bring you some scriptures and thoughts and ideas to help you through the day. We begin, as usual, with scripture, and today it comes from the book of James, chapter 5 and verse 8. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. If you're reading the Bible in a year today, you need to read through Proverbs 13, 14 and 15 and 2nd book of Corinthians chapter 5. Some thoughts for the day. I think that age is a very high price to pay for maturity. Keep some company with people who inspire you. Every day you are alive is a special occasion. Every minute, every breath is a gift from God. The motivational thought for the day. Don't be afraid your life will end. Be afraid that it might not begin. On this day, in 1878, Cleopatra's Needle was installed in London. On this day in 1895, Annie Londonderry, formerly Annie Kopczowski, arrived in Chicago to complete the first round-the-world trip by a woman on a bicycle. It took her 15 months and she collected a $10,000 prize. On this day in 1940 in France, the Lascaux caves were discovered. They contain many prehistoric wall paintings. And in 1970 on this day, the supersonic airliner Concorde made its first landing at Heathrow Airport. In 1979, Indonesia was hit with an earthquake that measured 8.1 on the Richter scale on this day. And in 2017, on this day, a monster fatberg, 250 metres long and 130 tonnes, the size of 11 buses, was found in sewers under East London. Just in case you're wondering what a fatberg is, it's a collection of rubbish, solid rubbish, that's been put into septic systems that shouldn't be in there. It includes things like baby wipes and other things, and fat that congeals into a very large and obviously unpleasant lump, which is known as a fatberg. The personal story of the day is entitled A Safety Check. The Lord's Supper, communion, fellowship, whatever you call it, there's nothing quite like this solemn and important act of worship. Incidentally, it's possible to participate in communion without even thinking about God. It can become a ritual, full of action but empty of meaning. If we let that happen, we miss out on a time of gratitude and fellowship. And we miss the blessing that comes with a serious examination of our spiritual condition, as suggested in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 28. Communion, that solemn time of self-examination before God, reminds us of our responsibility to check the attitude of our heart, and it helps us to keep the slate clean. Be sure to experience the intended benefits of communion, ongoing fellowship with Christ and each other. The devotional thoughts of the day. The first, out of control. The scripture comes from John chapter 18 and verse 37, with references from Matthew 27 verses 11 to 26. For this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. When fire erupted in the Yellowstone National Park in 1988, officials decided to monitor and contain the blaze instead of putting it out. the National Park Service had adopted a, quote, let it burn, unquote, policy towards such fires in 1972. This was based on a recognition that periodic fires are a necessary form of forest management to get rid of old deadwood. But the 1988 Yellowstone fire was fed by two unpredictable factors: an excess of deadwood left over from previous fires and unusually strong winds that fanned the flames into an inferno. Before snow finally put out the last fire, 36% of Yellowstone Park had burned. The Roman ruler in Jerusalem found that he had a similar situation on his hands when the Jewish leaders brought Jesus Christ to him for trial. Pontius Pilate had been through this kind of thing before. Even at the time of Jesus' arrest, Pilate's prison was full of various criminals he had tried and condemned, including a rebel and murderer named Barabbas, and two thieves whose crucifixion was imminent. But there was something very different about Jesus. When Pilate tried to release this man he knew to be innocent, as we read in verse 18, an angry mob fanned the situation into an inferno of hate that threatened to erupt into a full-scale riot. That was the last thing that Pilate needed on his imperial resume. His position back in Rome had already become shaky because of actions he had taken that incited the Jews against him, as we can read in Luke chapter 13 and verse 1. Pilate wanted nothing more than to be rid of this explosive mess, but it wasn't going to be that easy. The Gospels of Matthew and John give accounts of this trial before Pilate. John chapter 18 verses 28 to 19, 18 to 28 and 19 to 16 is probably the best account. Pilate declared Jesus innocent, but he couldn't release him because of his eagerness to quieten Jesus' powerful enemies. So Pilate gave the crowd Barabbas instead. Pilate's wife suffered torment because of Jesus, and Pilate himself was in turmoil. Tragically, Pilate refused Jesus, and the name of Pilate became an infamous one in history. The second thought is entitled The Last Supper. The scripture is from Luke chapter 22 verses 19 and 20. And he took bread and gave thanks, and brake it, and gave it to them, saying, This is my body which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. Likewise, also the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. The final meal with the disciples is also considered to be the first communion. The new covenant, which will be sealed on the cross, was instituted. At the time, the disciples were not aware that this was the beginning and not the end of something. The meal took place in the traditional Jewish way. The bitter herbs reminded of the slavery and torture in Egypt. The spotless lamb was slain as a reminder of salvation, of the blood on the doorposts, which prohibited the angel of death from touching the Israelites. The unleavened bread was there, removed from the oven before it had time to rise or bake. The entire meal was eaten in haste, and the people, all the tribes of Israel, set out lifting hands, that is, praising God. Now, 12 disciples sat around the table representing the 12 tribes. A better blood was soon to be shed. A better covenant was soon to be instituted. A new people was to come, a people who, together with a believing Israel, would be gathered from all the nations and tribes. A greater deliverance was to take place, a deliverance from all darkness and bondage of the world. A more important meal was to be eaten, the symbolic sharing of Jesus' flesh and blood. He had already expressed this point when he previously had said, as we read in John chapter 6 and verse 53, "Verily, verily I say unto you, except ye eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, ye have no life in you." Just as bread, through digestion, becomes part of our body, Jesus was to become one with us. A deeper, more wonderful and more enduring fellowship between God and mankind was to come. The facts of the day. Birds may travel great distances on their migrations. The Arctic tern, for example, travels from the top of the world, the Arctic, to the bottom, the Antarctic, a round trip in a single year of 25,000 miles. Television broadcasts were suspended until the end of World War II in 1945. This delayed the development of an affordable television system until the late 1940s. The closing thought for today: be what you want the world to be. Thank you for being with us this morning. We hope that you've enjoyed and benefited from the Daily Post, and we look forward to your company again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. Bye for now.